Let me reset one more time, sorry, because I have my screen paused. Can everybody see my screen now? I'm going to do this, if you will, this training session is going to be a quick start guide in 3 sections. The first section will be how do we add personnel or entities to the program. Second section will be how do we add inventory or items to the program, serialized, non-expendable, expendable, and I'll explain the differences of those when we get to it. And the third section will be how do we check out equipment or inventory to those personnel or that entities that we have added to the program in the database in the first section. So if you would, please hold your questions, okay, until I finish each section, and I'll be happy to answer them at that point in time. When you first open the program up, what you've opened the program up to is this screen right here. We call this the player staff screen. And over here on the right-hand side, I can switch between players and staff by what's being displayed here. And you can see here there's not only staff members here, but there's also entities here. That's how I switch what's on the display here. Now, the display normally comes configured with just the player ID, the first name, and the last name. So what I do here is I can go to this configure display button right here, and I'll get it back to what it is by default. But over here on the right-hand side, it's the last square button, rectangular button here, configure display. I can put up here exactly what information I want to have on the players and the staff on this screen right here. The only difference between players and staff is that we'll basically have everything basically divided up so that you'll have just your players, student athletes, or your players on one screen here, your staff and entities on another screen. Up here at the right, at the very, very top, okay, if we have multiple databases, this is where we have multiple sports or multiple databases. So this is how you switch between those, okay? So in this situation right here, on any particular individual, we have 3 tabs here. We have the equipment. This is the page we're going to use for checking out, and I'm going to get to that here a little bit later in the third section. Then we have the player information screen, which is where we have the first name, last name, and the ID here, and any information as far as gender is concerned, whether a player or staff, I can switch them between the two right here easily, and then any other information in this field that you want to have on the personnel. And then we have this size tab right here. We have some can sizes here in these 2 columns. And then we have on the right-hand side here the sport-specific size. In this particular case, it's a football-specific size, but you can configure this for any sport you want. And you can also rename these categories right here under the sport-specific size to whatever it is that you want to see on the screen. So in order for us to check equipment out to somebody for the first time, we have to have 3 pieces of information. We have to have their ID, their first name, and their last name. So in this particular case right here, I'm going to go through adding someone for the first time. And there's a couple of different ways you can do it. One way you can do it is you just simply hit the add button, which brings you to this screen right here. Or up in there, if they present you with an ID card with a barcode on, you have a barcode scanner, you can simply just scan that barcode like that, and it will take you right again to this particular screen right here where you can add them. At this point here, you can put in their last name and their first name. And then if they're not in the database, anytime that you scan that ID, this is the page it'll bring it up to. And then you hit OK, and now they're added to your database. And now you're ready to start checking equipment out to them. And once they're in your database, and I'm clicking over here next to the ID, if you will, on screen here, I double-click there, and it'll always bring me to this tab right here if they're in the database. This is, again, that check-in, check-out page where it says equipment that I was talking about, which I will cover a little bit later on. But as far as, doing the check-in, check-out procedure right here, but there's a couple of pieces of information that you'll want to know on this screen right here. And that is, for example, if I have somebody in here, for example, I have this information. We've divided over here the serialized and the non-expendable and spendable equipment into 2 different tables here that you can see. And these are what I call the brief tables. In other words, if I give somebody this particular item right here, this Reebok item, which just happens to be a long-sleeve, loose-fit, white, large shirt, if I've given this to these individuals, okay, you can see that basically has 2 previous out, okay? So in other words, he has 2 outs to him. But if those 2 transactions took place at different time and dates, it won't show up on this display right here. I actually have to go to the display checkout history page right here. And over here, I can see exactly when I gave him those 2 items with the time and date stamp. And then also, too, if it's enabled, and in some cases, the configurable, if it's enabled with the person's login into our program, you'll actually have the initials of the person that actually did the transactions right here. So this is the piece of information that you get here. Besides the personal information where I showed you where I put the last name, first name, and the ID in here, we also have, like I said, the gender, whether they're player, staff, date of birth. We have all this other information here, the address, city, state, all this other information if you want to keep track of that. If they're a dual sport, or excuse me, if they're a two-position player, you can put both positions that they play at, what sport they're identified with, and their jersey number. Now, if they're a dual sport athlete, I can simply come up here, hit this down arrow, move them to whatever category I want to, whatever sport I want to move them to, okay? And that'll automatically switch them over. And now they're no longer associated with football. Now they'll be associated with that other sport. Also over here, we have this notes field right here that you can fill in whatever information you want to have on that particular individual. You can fill that information in right here. We also have the size tab, and again, these two columns right here have pretty much all the can sizes that we have, all the way down to jacket, all the way down to shoes. This other last 5 in each of these columns have been added. These are optional sizes you can add for the players. But we also have the sport-specific sizes over here, which you can edit and change whatever you want on here. Plus that, you can make any particular sport that you have, you can have specific sizes, and you configure that for those specific sizes. And I'm not going to go over that today, but that's something in the program that you can do. I just want to make you aware of it, that it's possible. Now, at this point right here, once you get everybody into your system, or once you've had the information into the system, like I said before, now you can go ahead and check equipment out to them. Now, for example, if they come up to you and they want some equipment, but they don't have a permanent ID yet, what you can do is you can always add them with a temporary ID, like this, like I'm doing up here. I'm just typing it in this top right-hand corner right here, and bring them up to this page, you know what I mean? And then just add them to your database, and now you're ready to check equipment out to them. Now, once they present you with a permanent ID, under the personal information, this is the only place in the program where we allow you to change what we call the primary key to the record, but also the ID. This is the only place in the program where we allow you to change the ID. But so, for example, he comes up and presents you with that permanent ID card, and you scan the barcode, that information goes in right here, and you go OK. And now it has changed that temporary ID into a permanent ID. And now you can go ahead and continue to operate with that particular individual. Now, one of the pieces of information that everybody in equipment management really, really appreciates, and I certainly do too, is that we have the size buttons here. Once you've entered the sizes on these fields right here, once you've entered the sizes for a particular player or a staff member, you know, once you put this information in here, you can simply hit this sizes button right here, and it'll bring up this chart for you that shows you exactly what sizes of everything that everybody wears. So, for example, T-shirt size right here, I'll click the plus sign next to T-shirt size, and it'll show me exactly how many people wear a particular size. And then if I want to, I can drill down by hitting the plus size next to this 2X, for example, and it'll show me exactly who the individuals are that wear that particular size. This can be a very, very valuable piece of information when you're ordering and you're trying to make sure that you order just enough equipment to satisfy the entire team. Now, we don't allow deletion of players and staff. In other words, what I mean is once you've entered somebody into the program here, if they go away and they're going to be gone and permanently out of the system, okay, out of your system, I mean, or they've left the school, they've left the organization, at that point there, we don't allow you to delete them. What we do allow you to do is archive them. And at this point right here, just highlight the player. I'm going to archive this particular individual right here. You go over here to this button right here, the third button down, the rectangular button says Archive Player, and I'll click on that, and what will happen is it'll automatically remove him from my active grid or my active players, but move him over to my archive. And if I go over to my archive, I can switch that down below here under Players, Active, and Archive. I go down here to Archive, and sure enough, that individual should appear under Archive. And sure enough, there he is right there. Now, if it's somebody who's basically become ineligible or they've left for a year and then they come back, because you don't want to lose all that information, all the stuff they've had checked out to them, nor, more importantly, you don't want to lose their size information. You simply come back over here to the archive and activate the player. It's the same position as it was with the archive, and click that, and that'll automatically move them back into your active roster again. So That's how you move somebody between active and archive. Now, are there any questions at this point right now?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes, sir.
If a player becomes a coach,
Mm-hmm.
can you just automatically change him to staff?
Yes, sir. And you do that right over here. You do that right over here under personal information between players and staff right here. You just move him to staff just like that.
Okay.
And now he doesn't appear under players. You'll have to go over to staff to find him now.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. Then this completes our first section right here. So I'm going to move on to the second section, and that's how to add equipment. Now, we have these three buttons at the top here that you switch between: serialized, non-expendable, expendable. The difference essentially between serialized and non-expendable and expendable equipment is basically this. Serialized equipment, you put a barcode label on it, whether that be a cloth label, whether that be a polyester label, doesn't matter what it is, but once you put that on an item, that's the only item in the world with that particular ID on it, or that particular serial number, like I have right here. And once you have done this, okay, then basically it's like putting a license plate on a car. You may have several pieces of that same gear that look exactly the same, that may have the same size, may have the same face mask, whatever on it, okay? But when the minute you put this ID on it right there, it becomes the only one in the world with that particular ID. And there's a couple of great information or pieces that you can get of information off of that particular item when it's serialized versus non-expendable, expendable. For example, if it's a serialized item, we can go over here and we have this display history button, and we can show you everything that's ever happened to that piece of equipment while it's been in your inventory. And when you're putting serialized equipment in, you know, it's pretty much the same. We have this tree just like we do for expendable, non-expendable, but there's some things that are different about it, and I'm going to show you that. Also, too, in this new version of the program right here, if you accidentally put something in under shoulder pads, and it should have actually been a helmet, for example, okay, I have this place right here, this button down here at the very bottom, where I can actually change it to wherever I want it to go within the serialized category. That's new in this version of the program. We never had that before. You could move things in expendable, non-expendables, but you could not move those in the serialized categories between categories, like I said, between helmets, shoulder pads, or any other serialized piece of equipment. So once you put that ID on there, and by the way, when you're going to add that piece of equipment, I highly recommend, for accuracy and everything else, put the ID or put the label on the piece of equipment first, or the jersey, whatever it is, and then bring it up here and then scan it at this point right here. So in this stage right here, I'm just going to go ahead. We have shoulder pads here to deal with. Excuse me. We have shoulder pads to deal with here. So I'm going to pretend that I scanned the label that I just put on that new pair of shoulder pads. And this is how I'm going to add to the system, because when I scan it, it goes into this block up here, and automatically it brings you to this screen right here. Now I can start to add this particular shoulder pad. Now, you'll notice in this case here that we're keeping track of the manufacturer and the model, the size of those particular shoulder pads, okay? So these areas are grayed out right now, and the reason why they're grayed out is because we need to fill in what this information is right here. So at this point right here, where I'm coming over here to display grid right here, if you'll see where I just selected that, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to select a shoulder pad. Now, here's my manufacturers of shoulder pads right here. So that satisfies the manufacturer. Here's the model right here. That would satisfy the model. And then the size right here. And then once I put this piece of information in right here, and I go down to the lowest portion of the tree, so in other words, manufacturer, model, size, just like it's organized here, and I'll say at this point here, I want to assign that to the new item at the left that I just added. So basically, I'll add it to here, and you'll see as soon as I hit this button down here at the bottom right, assign category to item at left in this window, all of a sudden it fills in that piece of information. It's Douglas, quarterback, and it's a size small. It has a status date associated with it, and that again goes into the history to tell me that's when I've added this piece of new equipment, okay? So at this stage right here, if I have multiple pieces of equipment, I'll get to that in a second, how you can do this in the shortcut mode, but now if I hit OK, now that piece of equipment has been added to my inventory. And by the way, on the grid, excuse me, for serialized equipment, we also show you who is checked out too in this column right here. So you can quickly come up here and get yourself a list of exactly what it is that you want to have and see who's got what particular shoulder pads or what piece of equipment checked out to them here. And you can print this report in such, and then this is a way of making it customizing, so it'll give you that piece of information on any particular piece of serialized items you want. Now, if you have multiple, if you're going to be putting multiple pieces of serialized equipment in for the first time, for example, you just received a box of power shoulder pads from Rydell, okay, and you're going to be putting those in. It will behoove you to basically put those in order before you start scanning everything in by manufacturer, or excuse me, by model and by size. And I'll show you why here. Because you saw me add that one shoulder pad, and I'm going to add another shoulder pad again. So say, for example, up here, top right, I just scanned the barcode, and it brings me up to this screen right here. If I go down here and I go to my Douglas, I go to my quarterback, and I go to my small here now, okay, and let's say I have 5 of these right here, I'm going to assign this, just like I did before, to the item at left, okay, just like that, and it fills this gray area in with that information. But let's just say I have 5 of these, like I said, of this particular size and model and manufacturer shoulder pad here. If I use the OK add another, I'm going to let you see exactly what takes place here. What happens is it keeps this information in here, the manufacturer, model, and size here in those gray areas, but now it's ready for me to scan the next barcode. So if I scan the next barcode and hit OK, then it automatically, excuse me, OK, and do an OK add another. Now automatically, you see, it puts that shoulder pad in there with that information, and now I'm ready for the next one. And I can just simply keep scanning like this, okay, and hit OK add another, and I can simply go through those very quickly without having to go down here and negotiate the tree here and put that information in here. Now, if I've got somebody in there, or excuse me, once I put somebody in there, or once I put a shoulder pad in there, not somebody, something, once I put this shoulder pad in here, if, for example, I've made a mistake, and this is really not a size small, this is really a size medium of this particular shoulder pad, all I simply have to do is go over here to the tree, and you'll notice there's no medium here, so I'm going to add medium. Well, size comes underneath model right here, so I'm going to go back up to the model right here, and down here at the very bottom where it says add category, this button right here, I'm going to click add button, and I'm going to put a medium in here. Now, once I put this medium in here, okay, you can see now I've got my 2 sizes, small and medium. I'm going to highlight the medium, and then I'm going to assign this to the item at left right here that previously I'd entered under small. And what's going to happen is this screen is going to pop up and it's going to ask me, are you sure you want to change this item from Douglas quarterback small to Douglas quarterback medium? And yes, I do at this point, because I accidentally put it under small to begin with when I entered the database. And you'll see it changes this to medium. I'll hit OK, and now there's my size medium, changing that shoulder pad to that. Okay, so that's how we deal, that's how you add serialized equipment, and that's the information that you're going to have available to you on serialized equipment. Are there any questions, by the way, at this point on serialized equipment and adding it? Very good. Then I will move on to the non-expendable, expendable equipment. Now, the difference between the non-expendable, expendable equipment and the serialized equipment is that on the non-expendable, expendable equipment, this is more like what your experience has been with barcode, aka auto ID technology, and that is that when you go to the grocery store, for example, and you grab an item, you look at the item and it has a barcode on it. Well, everything on the shelf of exactly that same item, they all have identically the same barcode labels on them, unlike our serialized items where everything has a unique or different barcode label on it. So for the expendable, non-expendables, this is the way we put stuff in. So if you have stuff that comes into your inventory, for example, let's say gloves, okay, and they have a barcode label on them, I highly recommend that you use the barcode label that comes on the item to put it into your inventory, because it'll make it much easier to check the stuff out to people, okay, or as well as manage to add more inventory of that particular item to it. Now, simply the difference between expendable and non-expendable is just what the words say. In a non-expendable category, let's say, for example, I hand something out at the beginning of the season, and I want it back by the end of the season, I would put it under the non-expendable categories. Excuse me. If it's something that I hand out, and once it's gone out the window, I don't want it back. I mean, for example, mouthpieces, jocks, whatever, something that even if they want to bring it back to you, you don't want to receive it back. then I'll put that under expendable equipment. So in other words, once it goes out my inventory, that's it. It's out the window. And by the way, when you add or when you check something out to an individual under expendable and non-expendables, what happens here is that we have these columns right here, this on-hand column, then we have this checked out column, and then we have this reorder point column, which I'll cover reorder point here in just a sec. But on this on-hand column, what happens is it takes it out of your inventory right here, your on-hand quantity, for example. If I give this extra short out, okay, the size 28, it would move it from your inventory here and then put it into that individual's personal inventory right here. So that's basically the way we keep track of the gear that's in there. So you'll see, for example, if once I start checking stuff out, I'll have an on-hand quantity here, and then I'll have how many I've got checked out to the individual. Now, something else we have that's new in this version of the program right here is that we have basically a point right here in time where we can look and see exactly display history. So anything that we've ever checked out on this particular one right here, it'll give us that status date and time stamp, as well as who did the transaction, that's what the buy column for, and who the individual was we gave those to. So at any point in time, if you're trying to figure out who's getting all this stuff, you know, for example, here you can see, I'll display history, and sure enough, there it all is right there. You can see exactly where the equipment went to and when we checked it out. I meant to grab something with a little bit more information on than this one here. And you can see again, like I said, here's the date and time stamps on when the transactions took place, who you gave them to. So this might be valuable equipment if you're trying to figure out, you know, you're looking at something on the shelf and you're going, boy, we don't look like we've used a lot of these items. Let's see who used these. And if there are people that have gone out of the system and you don't think you're going to ever, then purge them out of the system that way, okay? But when you're adding new equipment to the expendable, non-expendable categories, and I'm just going to add something here. Let's just say I'm going to pick a hat, and I'm going to add it. I'm going to scan again, just like I would with a student ID card or the serialized label. I'm going to scan it, and I'm going to put that scan the barcode there, and that's going to bring me up to this point right here on the tree. And again, the tree looks very familiar from the serialized equipment, but it essentially operates very much the same way. So in this particular case right here, I have manufacturer, model, style, color, and size of hats right here, but they're all grayed out. So I don't have the information filled in there. So I need to go over to the tree here, and if it's in the tree already, I can go ahead and grab one of these here, go all the way down to the lowest level, okay, to the size right here, because here we go. Here's the manufacturer, here's the model of the hat, here's the style of the hat, here's the color, and here is the size right here. So once I've done that, I can just simply assign that to category at left. Oh, yes, and see it asked me. It's a duplicate selection, but that's fine, see? And then I can go ahead and put it in here just like this. And then I'll just add the quantity new because it's already in my inventory right here, see? Now I'm going to add it as it was as a new item instead of adding more to the items that I already had in there. And again, I'm going to go up here and scan the barcode label that's on that particular hat. I'm going to look down here. I'm going to go, no, it's not a Reebok hat. It's actually an Acme hat. So I'm going to add category right here. And I'm going to put the manufacturer Acme in here. And then I'm going to go to the model. I'm going to go, this is a super. And the style is, I'm going to say this is a duper. And then I'm going to put the color right here. All the good guys wear white, right? And then I'm going to put the size in here. And if it's one size fits all, I'll basically put ONSFA. Or one size fits all right here, okay? So I'll put that in there, and that's an adjustable hat instead of the adjustable that you saw in the previous one. So now that's in here. And notice that it automatically fills this piece of information right here. Now we can also put the cost of the item in here if we want to keep track of it. And all you got to do is just type the number in there. It'll automatically fill in the dollar sign and the period and the 2%, the two columns after that for you. And then as I told you before, this reorder point, what this is a minimum stocking level on any particular items that we have in our inventory. So for example, in this particular hat right here, I know this is a really popular hat, and I want to make darn sure that I get warned when this hat, or I'll be able to print a report that shows when this hat has basically reached its end of, or it's getting down in inventory. you can just basically translate this reorder point to minimum stocking level. So in this particular case here, I don't want to have anything less than 10. I'll type the number 10 in there, and I'll put the quantity of those hats in here. And now at this point, I can hit OK, and now those hats have been added to my inventory. And there they are right there for you, okay? Now, if any point in time I come up and I find more of those hats, if I scan the barcode, it'll automatically take me to this screen right here that you saw before. And at this point right here, I can just put in how many new that I've just received at this point. And that's where you see me put new in here instead of my on-hand quantity. And I'll hit OK. At that point there, it's in there. Now, if I, for example, make a mistake, let's say this was not the super duper white, it was actually a black hat, okay, I can always come back up here to this guy right here and see here's my one size fits all, that's my size, here's my color white, here's my duper, which is my style. I got to go to, if I'm going to change the color to black, I have to go to the next category up in the tree, which is the duper right here. At this point right here, I need to add category. At this point here, I'm going to say these are black hats. These are not white hats anymore. And again, it's a one-size-fits-all or OSFA. I'll hit OK. And see what it'll do is it'll ask me, do you want to change the selections to the left to your new category? In other words, it sees the white and now it sees that I've just changed to a black. I want to say yes because I unintentionally or accidentally put them into the system under the wrong color. And then once I hit OK, it automatically changes it out here to black. So you can't make mistakes in the program right here. But again, as I reiterated back when I was on players and staff, you can't change these IDs. So if you put the wrong ID here for an item and entered it into your inventory like this, okay, my recommendation is you archive it away, create yourself an archive category here, put it in here, you know what I mean, as an archive, okay, and then at that point there, add it. If it's something that you've just made the mistake on, you know, as far as entering the ID and it's a brand new item, delete it, and what you can, all you have to do is just basically come up here and say delete the item on here, this button, the third button down here under add item edit button, and hit delete, and it'll automatically remove it. Now, this caution right here is important to note here, and I said I would only delete this if it was brand new and I just made that mistake, is because if you remove that, it will also remove it from any of the players' checkout records, okay, and their history tables. So the one that I showed you previously where it showed, you know, the condensed history, you know what I mean, how many items of any particular individual item they've received, as well as the history, which shows the transactions specifically by date and time, it will delete that item from both of those. So deleting an item, you have to measure this, okay, like I said, with this warning down here, that if it's never been checked out to anybody and it's brand new and you made the mistake, go ahead and delete the item and start over again. But if it has, then you'll basically want to archive it and re-enter the item under a different category and then purge that, okay? So that's how you enter inventory into the system. Now, are there any questions on any of this so far? No? Perfect. Well, then that concludes the second section, okay, at this point. Now you know how to not only add players and staff to the program, but now at this point here, you now also know how to add inventory to the serialized, non-expendable, and expendable categories. And again, like I said, you can't make mistakes because I just showed you here how to change and how to change it as far as anything that you put in here on the particular item. If you want to change it to something else, how to do that at this stage. All right, now I'm going to proceed with the third section here, and that's how do we check out equipment to somebody, okay? Back here on the player staff button, if you'll remember, okay, remember I told you, I said if somebody's in the inventory right now and you scan particular, you know, their ID right here, and by the way, in this particular case, I don't have a scanner hooked up, I don't have the ID in front of me, I'm just going to simply highlight that ID like this, and I'm going to copy it, I'm going to put it over here, and I'm going to pretend by putting this paste in here that I've actually scanned the item and hit enter, and it brings me this page right here, which is the check-in and check-out page right here. Now, you'll see these buttons that are grayed out right here, the check-out, check-in, loss plus, loss minus, scrap plus, and scrap minus, okay? At this point here, it's ready for you to scan the ID on a particular item in order to check it out to somebody. So, again, I don't have the items in front of me, so what I'm going to do here, is I'm going to go ahead and grab, I'm going to do this the easy way for me. I'm just going to grab a particular item right here, and I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to double-click next to the ID next to this individual, which brings me to this page. And then what I'm going to do is pretend that I have scanned it in with my barcode scanner, scanned the RD. So I'm going to hit enter here, and now you'll see these checkout buttons just became active, as well as what you just saw me scan up here came down in here where you can see the item and its ID. And by the way, if you want a description of the item, down here in blue, you'll see all the way across the bottom right here is the description of that item, as well as what your on-hand quantity is, as well as what your reorder point is. Now, at this point right here, if I want to check out one of these, you see previous out 0, out now is 0, in now is 0. At this point right here, I want to check one of these out. So I click this button right here, and once I click this button, you'll see now I have a quantity of 1 for out now. So at this point here, I only want to give him 1 hat, and I'm done at this point. So I'm going to hit OK. Now, in that particular individual, see, you can see here, here's the hat, and this is on the condensed records, if you will, for what expendable, non-expendable items I've given him. For display checkout history, sure enough, there is the time and date stamp on it with who did the transaction, with the ID, and what I gave him at that point right there. And by the way, this screen here is divided up so you can see the serialized equipment versus the non-expendable, expendable, or any particular piece of equipment that you want to see here. But now at this point here, I have already checked this out to that individual right there. Now, another way that you can do that.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, we got to move to another room real quick. I've already got you on the phone in the other room, but we're getting kicked out because of a class.
No problem. No problem. And we'll do this. Would you like me to pause for?
So if you just give me like 2 minutes, we'll be there.
Okay, not a problem then. And Joe, in that case, you bet. And Joe, in that case, there, I'm going to continue on. I'll cover back with them, okay, here in just a minute, okay?
Okay.
But this particular case right here, like I said, if you scan the person's ID, it brings them up to this page right here, with the check-in, check-out page, if they're in the inventory system. Now, if you scan an ID, for example, and this page does not come up, this page comes up instead, okay? That means that this individual is not in inventory at that point right there. So at that point right there, if you now at this point right here, add the first name and last name like we previously talked about, as well as the ID, and then now you should be able to start checking equipment out to that individual. But again, if you scan the ID and it automatically brings you to this check-in, check-out page, that means that person is in the inventory already, and you don't have to do anything at this point except just go ahead and check stuff in and out to them, okay? Now, previously when I talked about the fact that you have reorder points, you can configure in the program to have it trigger so that when you have an item that's reached the minimum stocking level or fallen below the minimum stocking level as far as the reorder point quantity is concerned, at that point there, a window will pop up here when you go to check the item out to them that will warn you that this particular item is at or below the minimum stocking level or the reorder point for that particular item. And again, that's configurable in the program. So you can turn that on or off if you would like, but that particular will give you the warning in real time when something has reached its end of inventory, or excuse me, reached its minimum stocking level, so that you'll know. Another way that you can do it too is we have a report function that you can go in and pull it up, and it'll show you exactly all the items that are at or below the reorder points. It'll show you those. So if you're the slightest bit apprehension that you're going to run out of a particular item before the season's over, I highly recommend that you print that report and you're able to go back to it, okay, and see it at that point there. Dan, are you with us yet?
I am on the phone.
Okay, but not on the video yet? Okay.
Not quite.
That's all right. I'm going to continue to go because as long as you can hear us, you'll know exactly what we're doing, okay? We're not going to do anything special. Now, if, for example, I've gone ahead and I've checked something out to somebody, like, for example, this hat right here, okay? But in this particular hat, this was not really what I gave them. I made a mistake. There was a different hat that I wanted to give them. Then what I'll simply do is and you see, as soon as I click next to the hats right there, I'm going to do a check-in. And so my previously out was 1. Now my in now is 1. So I've just checked that hat back in again. And now I'll hit OK. And now if you go back and look at that particular individual's record, you'll see that, yes, indeed, he no longer has that hat checked out to him, but the display history, at least it has a point here where you can see where I checked it out to him and then checked it back in again. And now at this point, I'm ready to give him a different hat, if you will. So at this point here, I'm just going to grab something different. And again, because I don't have the barcodes for these things, I will go ahead and cut and paste it right into here. And then now I can go ahead and hit enter. And sure enough, there's my buttons. Now I'll check that particular hat out to him. And now that's done. Now, it's easier, as I was saying before previously on the expendable, non-expendable items, it was much easier to have these particular items, okay, and use the barcodes that come on the item. But if you created your own IDs for these items and they didn't have a barcode label on it, you can also print what we call a bar board chart right here. And I'm going to print one out here. And basically right here, it's got the items themselves, okay, and the description of the items with a barcode that's associated with that particular item's ID. So that if you don't have the barcodes on the item, this is another way that you can use this to be able to check the items out to people off particular items that have IDs that you've created for them, okay? And again, once you scan the barcode, it does exactly the same thing that I showed you previously, and that is that it will go ahead and scan it in here, and then now you're ready to go ahead and check in, check out. Now, loss plus and loss minus and scrap plus and scrap minus, what those are about right there is that if somebody comes to you and they say, I've just gotten a pair of gloves, you've given them out to him yesterday, but he comes up and he wants another pair of gloves today, and you say, what happened to the pair of gloves I gave you yesterday? If he says, well, I lost them, that would be a loss plus. So in this particular hat right here, I can say, okay, you lost one of those hats, but you know what, I'm going to go ahead and check out another one to you, and you can see that lost one and out now, and now I hit OK, and now at this point right here, it at least creates in your record right here, your display history, you can see that you, in fact, had lost one, okay, and that's the reason why you got so many within the short period of time that you got them at that point right there. And also, too, if somebody's losing a lot of things, you'll see that readily on the screen right here, or on the display checkout history, okay? Now, are there any questions on any of that so far as checking this stuff out? That's the manual way, if you will, of doing it right there, okay? Now, something else.
Les,
I'm sorry?
when you said you can have the issued by, how do we go in and put that information in? That's in
a different training, and Joe, I'll cover that with you when I get done with this quick start guide, okay, if you'd like?
Yes, sir.
And how to configure that. But what basically we have in the system, we have a point where you have multiple people using exactly the same system or the same computer to check stuff in and out, but you want to track it by the initials of the person who did the transactions. I'll show you how to configure that here and after we get done with this quick start guide, okay? But that's in a different section, and I'll be happy to explain that to you. But
okay,
we can do that. Now, remember I was showing you the bar board over here, the expendable, like I said, for the hats right here, okay? You can also, this one right here, we also can print a bar board for our players. So, for example, if they don't have player ID cards, per se, with a barcode or a mag stripe reader that we're able to read or pick up on, we can always go over here and we can put them in here with whatever IDs we want at that point. And then what we can do is go over here to our reports, and we can print a bar board of all the staff members here. And as you can see, it comes out in exactly the order you saw it on the screen, and basically it has the person's names down here, but it takes the IDs that you created for them and put those into a barcode so that now you can use these to scan stuff out. Now, the reason why this is important, okay, is to streamline the entire process as far as being able to check stuff out to individuals are concerned, okay, is you can streamline that process by simply creating what we call the command bar board, okay? So these buttons that you see up here, the check in, check out, on the command bar board, you'll see there's a barcode that represents the check out, check in, loss plus, loss minus, scrap plus and minus, and the in, check in or out, which is essentially the same as hitting the enter key. So if I have this command bar board in front of me, I have a bar board of all the players, and I have either barcodes or bar board of all the equipment that I'm going to be checking out. I can simply use that barboard and for example, I can scan the barcode for the person, the individual items, or the individual ID, I mean, right here. It brings me to this page. Now I can scan that checkout barcode, you know what I mean, or scan the ID, I mean, whatever it is, the item I'm going to give them, and that will automatically bring me to this right here. But instead of clicking the button now, I scan the bar board, the command bar board right here, this that I showed you that I printed out from this print command bar board from. I'll scan checkout, and sure enough, it does exactly the same thing as if I've gone up here and clicked this button right here. And then I'll scan end, check in or out, which is the same essentially as doing the OK add, and that's it. So if you use the command bar, if you use the barcode technology in our program as embedded, if you will, you know what I mean, with a lot of auto ID or barcode techniques in it to use and speed up as well as the accuracy of your check-in, check-out procedure, by using the command bar boards and by using the command, the bar board chart, as well as use the barcodes on the equipment, as well as using the bar board for the players and staff, you can readily speed up, you know what I mean, the entire process. And by the way, I had that organized by, you know, staff on that bar board for the players and staff. I had it done by ID here, but I could have done it simply by last name. And when you go to print the bar board, it'll automatically put it by last name right here. But if you want to know your players just by first name, or that's where more familiar, then basically click the top of the column right here, and then go back and print your bar board. And sure enough, you'll have them in the order of, you know what I mean, their first names instead of their last names. So you can have the bar boards in whatever order you want to have them in. And I recommend you can put these into clear plastic pages, and they're readily available to you to be able to check them out, and as well as having the barcode. Now, as you saw right now, what I've been doing so far is I've been checking stuff out one-on-one to people, okay? And let's say at the end of the season, I'm sitting here and I've got a pile of shoulder pads, okay? But I don't know who they belong to. It would be very cumbersome. The older version of the program, it was this cumbersome. I'd have to go through, I'd have to use this button up here, whose is it, scan the barcode on the item, find out who the player was, and then go to that particular player and then check it back in from him. So for example, I go to this guy here and go to his barcode, and if I go to Express and do a paste here, it'll tell me that this one's to Lawrence Vickers. So in this case here, I got to go all the way back over here, and I got to go down to my V's to Vickers. Excuse me, I was on staff. I'd have to go to Lawrence Vickers right here, and I'd have to go to his shoulder pad or scan it right here. And now it would basically check it in. I would do that. Well, that would be cumbersome if you have a lot of shoulder pads to deal with. We have streamlined that procedure, if you will, now with this Express button right here. And instead of just having the whose is it function, which is another thing that serialized items give you, if you find something on the locker room floor and you're trying to figure out who it belongs to, you can simply scan it, and it'll tell you exactly who it belongs to. But now I can also, when I'm done at the end of the season with that file of shoulder pads, I can go down here and checking in a serialized equipment, the Express button. Under the Express button, I can check in from player, and I simply now have to just start scanning, you know, barcode labels, and now it'll automatically check them in. So just instead of having to locate who the player is that belongs to that particular item and go to his check-in, check-out record, now I can just do this. Also, too, at the end of the season, if you have equipment that needs periodic maintenance or reconditioning like helmets, you can also do the same exact thing with those. Once you've checked them all in, now you can go out to recondition, start scanning those, and it'll automatically scan those out to reconditioning. And then now you load them in the bag so they can take them off to reconditioning. And once they come back in the boxes in the nice plastic bags, you can use the in from reconditioning right here, and you can scan them back into your inventory also that way. All right, now, last but not least, okay, everything I've showed you so far is checking something out to somebody one-on-one as an individual, okay? But we also have the capability, let's say, for example, you're putting bags together of stuff that you want to give out to an entire team to begin with at the beginning of the season. We have a group checkout procedure, or if you will, a mass checkout procedure that you could use to do that and accomplish that without having to go through each individual player one by one. And that's a two-step process. I'm going to show you the first step in the process. If you go to the Configure button right here, and you go to the group checkout, I have to establish the group of items it is that I'm going to be checking out to people. Now, I can check out items in the group checkout whether or not it has a size associated with it or doesn't have a size associated with it. And by the way, this group checkout only applies to non-expendable, expendable items, okay? So in this particular case right here, when I say groups of items, I'm going to add a group here, and I'm going to call this group the test group, okay? And I'm going to hit OK here. And now, for example, I'm going to go ahead and add items. And when I hit the Add Item button down here, okay, what comes up is this string here. Now, if it's an item that has a size associated with it, and that's what's in this top right-hand box right here, I either have the item and use the corresponding size with the selected player, or I can basically select an item, and if it doesn't have a size associated with it, then I'll basically scan that barcode in for that item right here, and it'll select that item, okay? So in this particular case here, let's go back to our hats here, and I want to give everybody, or I want to give all of them this super duper black hat, okay? And I'm going to do this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here. Once I selected this black hat, because one size fits all, I needed to go here, and I should have gone back over there and actually grab my item, which I'm going to do. But if it has a size associated with it, this is where I can do this particular one here. I'm going to go to the Reeboks, and I'm going to go to something that doesn't have, there you go. And this one has different sizes associated with it, so I can tell it this particular item here. Now I'll tell it what size am I going to use associated with that particular item right here. And I'm going to use the cap size. Or I believe that there is a head size. But in this case here, I'm going to use the cap size, okay? And then I'm going to select the item. And see, now it's added this item right here, this Reebok, this particular style, size, and color and everything, and it's added that, and that's what I'm going to give. And I'm going to give one of each to everybody in this particular test group. So I'm going to hit OK. Now at this point there's my hat sizes. Now I'm going to save this record right here because I'm going to grab an item that doesn't have a size associated with it, like my other hat that I had there, the Super Duper. So I'm going to go over here to Expendable, and I'm going to go over here to my Acme hat right here, and I'm going to use just the ID right here, and I'm going to copy this, okay? But in this, obviously you'll have a barcode scanner, barcodes available to you to do this with, and I'm going to go to the group checkout. In my particular test group, I'm going to add this item. Now this item has no size associated with it, so now right here I'm going to scan the barcode on the item, and there it goes in. And I'm going to give one to particular individuals in the group of that particular hat right there. One size fits all. Again, no size associated with it. And I'm going to hit OK. Now, the reason why it has this EXP number right here is because this EXP number is going to cover all the sizes of this particular hat right here. And you're going to see what I mean when I get to the point where I'm ready to check this out. In this particular case right here, since there was no size associated with it, that's why I had to use the item ID to add it to my group of items that I'm going to be checking out. Now, once you're done with this whole group right here, and by the way, you can rename that group later on if you'd like, or you can delete that group if you'd like. Now, at this point right here, I've got my two hats that I want to give to everybody, and I'm going to hit Save. So now I've completed the first step in the group checkout procedure of being able to check this stuff out to individuals, okay? Now, the next step is, who do I want to give these items to? In this particular case right here, we have a button up here on the top that says Group C/O or Checkout. And at this point right here, I can say, I want to clear all the boxes right here, or I want to select all the boxes. In other words, I want to give it to everybody on the team. In this particular case here, there's only certain individuals that I want to give this item to, okay? So I'm going to clear all the boxes. I want to give one to Mike Bell. I want to give one to, Abram Malam, like that, okay? And these are the only two individuals I want to give these to. So now I'm going to go back up here, and I'm going to select the group of items. Remember, I called it Test Group, and sure enough, there's my items right there, okay? And now I'm ready at this point right here where I'm saying, okay, I want to give these items to these two individuals right here. And then what I have to do is I have to do a verify size and quantity. That's what this button is down here at the lower left-hand corner. In other words, what it's going to do is it's not only going to make sure that I have all this stuff associated to this, okay, but also, too, I want to make sure that I have sufficient quantities of everything that I want to give to these individuals. And also, it would be nice to know if it has a size associated, do I have that size actually filled in? So I'm going to hit this Verify Size and Quantity button, and sure enough, Mike Bell comes up here because we have no cap size configured for Mike Bell. Now at this point right here, I can say I want to select, and I apologize, this is cutting off right here, but I can configure, I can basically say what size I want to give this individual, and I'm going to give him a one-size-fits-all, okay? And at this point right here, I can say, okay, I want to put in this player's size. Now, I can either say I want to put this size in for right now and leave the player's record unchecked. In other words, where I showed you the size charts, it'll leave that blank for his cap size right there. Or in this particular case right here, I want to update the player's record with what size I'm giving him. At that point there, I move on to the next individual. And again, one size fits all, and I'll update the player's record. And then once I've done that now, it says, okay, these are the sizes I'm going to give out. I have quantities, sufficient quantities, requires 2 of each one, and I have sufficient quantities at this point. I can print this verification report right here, and it'll show me exactly who the individuals are and what I'm giving them. And now I can proceed with the group checkout. I can close the verify window, and now with one click of the button, instead of having to go to both these individuals and scan both these hats in for them, I can basically go to this bottom button here in the lower left-hand corner and then check out the items to the players, and that's done. Now I have checked out those 2 hats, quantities of 1 each to both of those players right there. I'm done with the group checkout. So this is a way also of streamlining the process for doing check-ins and checks-outs, okay? So at this point here, I'm pretty much concluded with the quick start guide, and everybody here should have all the information you need to not only add players or staff or entities, okay? And what I mean by entities, for example, if you have a foundation or something that you're basically giving items to, instead of an individual, you could just simply use, for example, Make-A-Wish. You can make the first name Make A and the last name Wish, and then add them into the inventory that way. And that way, if you have to scan stuff out to them under the staff, you can basically scan it out to them instead of an individual. So now that we're done with that section, you should be able to check stuff. You should be able to add staff or players or student athletes, okay? And you should also, at this point, be able to add entities. And then the second step is that now you should be able to add serialized, non-expendable, expendable items, and you now understand the difference between the 3. And you should be able to add that inventory. And most importantly, what the system really does for you is now you should be able to check equipment out to those entities, okay? So I'll open it up at this point. If you have any questions on anything I've covered at this stage right here, I will be happy to answer questions.
I have one, Les.
Go ahead, sir.
When I exit the file and I want to back up the data, what's the file that I send to my backup drive?
It's equipmanager.mdb, Michael David Baker. So it's equip, equipmanager.mdb. That is where all of your work in the entire program is kept. And if you have different sports, Joe, in your particular case, you have one database with all the sports in it, but if you had different databases for each individual sport, there will be a separate database file for each one of those particular sports, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
No problem. Are there any other questions?
Les, I just wanted to add to that. You just said about having different sports.
Yes, sir.
Like a network system like ours.
Yes.
Can you just touch on how to change the sports?
Oh, I certainly can, real quick like. In this particular case right here, I don't know if this database Dan has different ones, so, but let me just go and how to do that. In your particular case right there, we have, if you will, it's a de facto standard on the network called EQ data. That's E as in echo, Q as in queen, then the word data. EQ data is our de facto location where we put all the databases in. So, for example, in your particular case, Dan, the EQ data folder will contain subfolders right underneath it, one folder for each of the individual sports right there. And you can see that here, for example, when I go to, and I'll go to the configure button, I'll go to database path right here. And at this point right here, I should see where you see different customers here. You would have different sports for each of the particular sports that you have a database for. So at that point right there, for example, right now I don't know what I'm on. If I wanted to go to BGSU football, I would double-click on that. In this particular case, it might be a sport folder for you. And then I'll see equipmgr.mdb. Again, Joe, that's that file right there that you want to back up, okay?
Yes,
At that point right there, I'll hit save, and now the system will automatically switch me over to that particular sport, in this particular case right here, this whole different database, okay? So that's how you navigate between the databases. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Good. Are there any other questions now at this point? Perfect. Well, listen, I thank everybody for your patience and understanding here. If you have any other questions, you're more than welcome at any point in time to call us up or email us, and we will be happy to answer any questions we can to help you in the process of using our program. So I thank you very much.